This is me. This is my personal website. I'm here. This website is mostly an index of my blogs. I've been blogging about defensive computing. That's kind of my thing for the last 10 years. 2 years at blogged at CNET, the last 8 years at Computer World. But the blog was just a hobby. You can see I do 1 or 2 a month. The Computer World blog just came to an end a couple weeks ago. They got bought out, the whole company, IDG, laid off a lot of people. I'm a long-time computer nerd, very long time, probably longer than anyone here, I would be willing to guess. I also have, there's my blog at Computer World, and I also have this website, routersecurity.org. So there's no need for you to take any notes today. Feel free to just listen. I will post the slides from today's talk, both at both Router Security and at my own personal website. This is the second time I've talked about router security. The first time was in 2014. The first time was all about configuring a router. This time is hardly anything about configuring a router, which actually came as a surprise to me. But this website has the vast majority of the stuff I would say about configuring a router. After I spoke in 2014, I said, geez, I should put this stuff online somewhere. And so I did. There are no ads on either of my websites. There's no WordPress on either of my websites. This is bottom of the line, notepad coded stuff. You can feel safe going there. Some highlights of the website. There's a security checklist, which is like a cheat sheet for router security. There's a page about setting up a new router, where I have a very, very different take from every other human being on the planet. How to securely set up a router. I could talk about that for 15 minutes, but I won't. It's on the website. There's also a tester page if you want to test your router. It has all sorts of tests. We'll go over a couple of them here today, but most of them we will not. And there's also advice about choosing WPA2 passwords. And that is one thing, It's one thing I want to talk about up front because you go to a router security, you got to hear something about WPA2 passwords. The important thing, of course, is that WPA2, everyone's heard of crack lately, last couple weeks, no big deal. Doesn't change any of the rules at all. Everyone has to install bug fixes, so what else is new? WPA2 passwords have to be resistant to brute force guessing, which raises a couple interesting points. One is they have to be at least 14 characters long. I won't bet my life on that. I've heard other people say 12, other people say 15. It depends on the assumptions you made for the horsepower used to guess your passwords. Certainly, battery horse staple is not a good password. I'm sure a lot of you get that reference. 3 words. I just saw an article recently that analyzed how 3 words are easily guessable. WPA2 passwords can be 63 characters long. Any bad guy in the world can guess your password. The crack flaw from a couple weeks ago was famous for the handshake when a new device joins a router network. There's a 4-way handshake. Bad guys can capture that handshake. This has nothing to do with the crack flaw. Bad guys can capture that handshake, take home those packets that were exchanged back and forth, and brute force guess billions of guesses a second. How many billions a second? What's the difference? The point is billions of guesses a second. The interesting thing, though, is, of course, bad guys have access to massive databases of every password that's ever been used in a data breach. So you think outside on 6th Avenue, all those thousands and thousands of people, all their passwords, forget words in the dictionary. All right, don't use words in a dictionary. Don't use 3 words in a dictionary. But if you want to secure WPA2 password, you have to never use a router that anyone else has, never use a password that anyone else has ever used, ever. Even if it's 14, 15 characters long, if it's like Denver 2014 or whatever, Poughkeepsie 2013, it could be long, but if any human being in the world has ever used that password, it's not secure because bad guys can make billions of guesses a second. So there is some advice on the website here about how to pick a password that no human being has ever used before. Routers are important. I'm preaching to the choir. The NSA has been hacking routers since at least 2013. Greenwald talked about it in 2014. Why are they after routers? Well, what can a hacked router do? Some stuff is obvious that a hacked router can do, and some stuff is not. Suffice it to say, there's no limit to what a hacked router can do. There's a whole page on routersecurity.org about it. The obvious stuff. Of course, a router can spy on you. There can be man-in-the-middle attacks. It can send you to scam websites, a bad DNS server. You think you're at Citibank.com, but you're at the Russian mafia's copy of Citibank.com. You enter the password. Thank you very much. You've given it to the Russian mafia. That's easy. That's trivial. In fact, changing DNS servers on routers is like the classic attack for routers. Router can join a botnet for DDoS attacks. That's a popular one. Router can download infected versions of software. You think you're updating Chrome, but you're getting a hacked version of Chrome. Routers make money. There have been a couple instances of this I read about where routers make money by showing ads. They modify unencrypted web pages and insert extra ads. They can also, of course, attack every single device on the network the router has access to and attack in all sorts of ways that we don't even know about. So another thing is a router can change data. Back a few months ago, Donald Trump met with Putin. There was one translator there. Suppose Donald Trump said, hey, I love that chocolate cake. The translator says to Putin, he doesn't give a damn about NAFTA. Trump says, hey, can I have that cake if you're not eating it? And the translator says, go ahead and invade Ukraine. He won't do anything. The router sits in the middle, and the router can change data too. There's really no limit to what a hacked router can do. Whoops. Oh, OK. One more? Yeah. All right, send you to Tails, perhaps, if you care about security and privacy. Tails is your mother ship here. You know, if you're dealing with a hacked router, you can end up at a scam copy of the Tails website. Good luck figuring that out. I know you're going to say, oh, it's secure. It says secure. It's not really secure. It's not using a extended validation certificate. It's using a domain-validated certificate. So it's no big deal to send you to a hacked copy of the Tails website. Oh, very common. One thing I did not know a lot of back in 2014, those of you who have web browsers open and alive and attack, try to go to ipx.ac. There are, on the website, there's a list of about 7 or 8 websites that will show you what your DNS servers are. Modifying the DNS servers was a classic router attack, which is how you end up at a scam copy of Citibank. So it's always good to know which DNS servers you're dealing with. Another one is dnsleaktest.com. There's a whole bunch of websites. You really, really want to be in the habit of knowing what DNS servers you're dealing with whenever you're dealing with a router, even your own. One thought was to make one of these websites your browser homepage. And by the way, those of you who are real networking nerds think you'll never fall prey to a hacked DNS server because your computing device has hard-coded DNS servers. You're using Google's 888 or OpenDNS or whatever. You know, the router has the final word on that. The router sees you doing UDP. The router sees you going to port 53. And you know, the router can answer your DNS requests and the heck with what you've asked for. So there's no limit to what a hacked router can do. OK, how did I get onto router security? I got onto it way back when, at the end of 2011, with WPS. How many people are familiar at all with WPS? It got some publicity. I see it didn't get a lot of publicity. It's a standard from the Wi-Fi Alliance. This is the same group that gave us WEP, introduced in 2007. It's an alternate on-ramp to a Wi-Fi network. You don't need a password. That's why passwords, we don't need no stinking password. What you need is a WPS PIN code. It is basically, it's a backdoor. Does anyone know what movie that's from? It was actually Badges. We don't need no stinking badges. What movie is that from?
Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that line, so I borrowed it. So WPS was intended for devices that did not have a keyboard, so they couldn't enter a password. Here you go. If a router supports WPS, there's going to be a little button for it somewhere on the router. Wi-Fi networks coming from a router that supports WPS will indicate them if you do a LAN scan with a good LAN scanning program. The S in WPS stands for setup. So way back when, in 2007, it would make it easier for you to set up a brand new Wi-Fi network. Nobody does that. Nobody ever did, I don't think. And it's identified by an 8-digit PIN. So WPS, all the devices involved with WPS have an 8-digit number, PIN code associated with them. Here's from the bottom of some consumer router, some ASUS router. There's its WPS PIN code. WPS runs in 4 different modes. The setting up a new network was one no one used. Here are the 3 modes at the bottom. This is from a Linksys router. Push button, router pin, and device pin. Push button was intended for things like this. You push a button on the router. We saw the whoops button. Then you push a button on your little toy here, and they talk to each other, no password needed. The other method, what do they call it? Device pin. Each WPS device has a serial number, a PIN code. You can go into your router, enter the PIN code for any particular wireless device, and the router will accept that onto the network. No Wi-Fi passwords needed. That is like the least interesting. But here's the most interesting one. The router itself has a PIN code. And a wireless device can get on a network regardless of the passwords. Nothing to do with passwords. 18-character passwords makes no difference. Router can get onto the Wi-Fi network just by giving the router a wireless client can get on just by giving the router its router's PIN code. And this is an Abbott and Costello joke. The problem is that the router PIN code is 8 digits, so you would think there's 100 million different PIN codes. But no, there's only 11,000 different PIN codes. And how did we get from 100 million PIN codes to 11,000? That's an Abbott and Costello joke. Anyone seen this bit? We go 7 times 13 is 28. It's hilarious. This has been viewed 2.7 million times. He starts out 7 into 28 is 13. That's not so interesting. You know, he owns his landlord rent. He owns 7 weeks rent. He gets $13 a week, so he gives him 28 bucks. And he's proving that 7 times 13 is 28. It's really pretty funny. But that's what happened with whoops PIN codes. PIN code was 8 digits. First thing we do is throw away 1 digit because it's a checksum. We're left with 7 digits. Still, that's what, 10 million possible PIN codes? But no. Wireless clients, when they talk to a router, they give it 4 digits first. And the router says, oh yeah, those are the right 4 digits. Then it gives it 3 more digits. 4 digits, 10,000 possibilities. 3 digits, 1,000. We're down to 11,000 possible PIN codes. We went from 100 million to 11,000. Abbott and Costello would be very proud of the Wi-Fi Alliance, the way they did that. So 11,000 PIN codes on an average. If you're just guessing, it only takes 5,500 guesses. How long does it take a bad guy to make 5,500 guesses on a computer? Obviously not long. So the you-know-what hit the fan. This was December 2011. Got a little publicity. Obviously, it didn't get a lot of publicity. So how did this happen? You tell me. I don't really know. How did we get from an 8-digit PIN code to 11,000 possible PIN codes? Was this incompetence by the Wi-Fi Alliance? This is the same company that gave us WEP encryption. Or was this done on purpose? I don't know. We have to decide for ourselves. Back in 2007, it was released in 2007, so it's probably developed in 2006. Nobody was using HTTPS in 2006. So if you got on someone's network, you could spy on them pretty well. There was rate limiting in the spec. So you're not supposed to be able to make 10 guesses a second. After a while, if there's a certain number of bad guesses, you're supposed to be timed out. Yeah, but the Wi-Fi Alliance, when they certified stuff, they didn't check for the rate limiting. So a lot of routers would let you make 10,000 guesses a second. And when this first came out, there was a router that let you disable WPS in the administrative interface. It actually did nothing. Nothing at all. So that's kind of what got me onto router security. WPS persists despite the not-so-big scare at the end of 2011. As a rule, business routers don't do it, consumer routers do. Mesh routers are the latest and greatest routers, and they're a mixed bag. I'm very thankful to Eero, Google, Luma, and Plume, which have walked away from WPS completely, and they all say, oh, bad security, we won't use it. Netgear, Linksys, well, of course, a lot of the other guys do use it. I'm pretty sure if you're a big fan of Netgear, because their Orbi mesh system is like the best Wi-Fi money can buy, I believe they only use the push-button mode of WEPs. They don't use the pin code mode. Ubiquity Amplify is a very interesting case. Ubiquity being a business company, Amplify being a consumer division of it. Which way did they go? They went both ways. When they released their Amplify routers, it did not do WPS, but a couple months ago they updated the firmware and now it does. But you can't turn it off, it's off by default, and I forget which modes of operation they support. Oh, this was another thing that got me involved with router security. This is another protocol, HNAP, Home Network Administration Protocol. I don't know much about it. I do know, however, it's been very buggy over the years, at least 4 bugs. D-Link had a lot of bugs with it. This was from a Linksys router. And I was reading about some bug in the HNAP protocol, and this is how you test if your router, by the way, you go into the router administration, at least for this router. This was the Linksys WRT54GL, perhaps the most popular router of all time. It supported HNAP. It didn't tell you. You go and poke around everywhere in the web interface, did nothing about HNAP, and of course you can't turn it off. And of course when there were bugs about it, I went in my router and said, oh my God. So this is kind of what got me started. I need to step up in the world when it comes to routers. By the way, the O'Reilly 17 Wi-Fi network for here, no WPS. It's a business router. I don't know what hardware they're using, but obviously it's business. Okay, one quick question. If you have a Wi-Fi network with a really long password and you don't have WPS, do you feel secure? Yeah. Not really. Is this coming as news to people? Because this is a blog I wrote in September 2013. This comes because there's billions of Android devices in the world. And here's from Android 7, Google's back up your data. They back up your Wi-Fi passwords. They're not hiding the fact that they do that. But what is interesting is that when Google backs up your Wi-Fi passwords, and that's for every Wi-Fi network you've ever been connected to, they back it up in a format that they can read it. I did not discover that. Here I document and talk about the people who did discover it. So if any Wi-Fi network that has ever had an Android device talk to it, chances are Google knows the password. And if Google knows the password in a format they can read, that means the US government knows the password too, because there's no resisting the US government. Okay, router security gets no respect. CNET loves some D-Link router. They love it. They said bad things about it. The trivial thing about it, oh, it's really no big deal. They give it a great score. By the way, D-Link routers, D-Link sued by the FTC for crappy security. I'm not going to go into the details. Time is short. But anyone who recommends a D-Link router, I think, doesn't know what they're talking about. SmallNet Builder, the home office for routers. These guys know more about it than I do, way more about it. All they care about is Wi-Fi. There's nothing about security in there at all. Never. All their router reviews, which are much of it is over my head. The Wirecutter recommend TP-Link. Oh, God, really? These people have no clue. All they look at are consumer routers. They really don't realize they're living in a small fishbowl. That slide is out of place. Oh, is your router spying on you? Interesting topic, one that I didn't talk about in 2013. Anyone have Netgear routers? A few people will admit it. As of April of this year, Netgear modified the firmware for a bunch of their Orbi routers and Nighthawk routers, and they include analytics in it. Analytics means spying. It's on by default. So those of you with Netgear routers, now you know to go look for it in the administration interface and turn it off. What is router? They're actually collecting MAC addresses. ASUS, people here use ASUS routers. Thank goodness, okay, not many people. They have a AI protection feature, they think it's great. A year ago, someone asked about AI protection. This is Trend Micro software that lives inside an ASUS router. Some guy said, is Trend Micro spying on me? And sure enough, they are. This came up, this was a blog from last May. The guy goes into a lot of details. Suffice it to say that the Trend Micro software in ASUS routers does phone home with all sorts of information. In fact, the router may even send your email messages to Trend Micro. Peplink. Peplink's my favorite router company. Peplink routers do not spy on you. I verified this by connecting one Peplink router to another and tracing every single outgoing connection it made when there were no clients talking to it. And I verify here, you can see it's going to DPT, destination port 123, protocol UDP. It's just phoning home to learn the time of day. That's the only thing it does on its own without any clients talking to it. Peplink routers do not spy on you. Has anyone ever traced, by the way, the outgoing connections from Amazon Echo? It's phoning home all the time. All the time, even when you're not talking to it. I don't know if anyone's traced a Roku box. Yeah, Roku's big. They like to use DNS 88888. God knows what they're doing. They're phoning home all the time. At least Peplink, I can promise you, is not spying on you in any way, shape, or form. Do not trust. Crack attack from just a couple weeks ago. Everyone got a ton of security. PFSense, this was like, can we shame people into actually installing bug fixes by having a lot of publicity? This got a lot of attention. Actually made NBC, actually broke out of the nerd world into the mainstream media. So yeah, PFSense, great security. They issue bug fixes. Peplink issued bug fixes. Here's Apple. Anyone here have Apple routers? Here's Apple. Apple was notified about the crack flaw at the end of August. And Apple sells routers. There you go, you can buy it today. Airport Extreme, $200. Apple was the only company that said nothing about the crack flaw. Even D-Link and ASUS, ASUS and D-Link were both sued by the FTC for crappy security. Even they at least issued statements they're going to look into it. Apple said nothing, absolutely nothing. So there you go about trusting Apple. Port 327060, oh, this is one of my favorite stories. January 2014, yeah, some router bugs. So what? No big deal. I wrote about it at the time. Let me see. And they were quickly fixed. This was a guy named, yeah, time is short. Excuse me? Yes, right. Eloy. There he is. Yeah, I could not pronounce it. Christmas 2013, he forgot the password to his own router. He's obviously a very good hacker. He looked at the firmware. He found that port 32764 was open on the LAN side. He says, what's going on here? He looks at the firmware, he finds there's a whole bunch of commands he can send to that port. Basically, anyone who doesn't know the router password can learn the router password. They can do all sorts of things, make the router dance and sing, no password needed, because a port 3264 was open. And he reported this. People had seen that open port way back when, years ago, didn't know what to make of it. When Eloy went public with it, other people found it on the WAN side, that port 327064 was open. So it got publicity, a lot of different routers from, anyway, lots of different companies.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Were there any that weren't made by any routers that weren't made by U.S. companies?
All the routers involved were made by a company called Sercomm, S-E-R-C-O-M-M.
And marketed under different names?
Yes, marketed under the routers from Cisco. This talks about Cisco, Linksys, Netgear, Diamond. Sercomm also makes routers for WatchGuard, Linksys, Aruba, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It wasn't every Sercomm router that was buggy, and every Sercomm router doesn't use their own firmware. So everything was fixed, and this was as dull and boring as you could get. Somebody found the back door in the router. Okay, the vendors closed it. But then, a few months later, Eloy is back, and lo and behold, although it looked like that port was closed, there was a secret password. And you could reopen that port. See, Soho router backdoor was fixed by hiding behind another. This one's really interesting. I know those of you who are network nerds, but Ethernet carries all the traffic. An Ethernet, anyone know what an Ethernet frame looks like? Is frame the right word, or is it packet or datagram? I don't know. Frame. An Ethernet frame carries everything. So an Ethernet frame starts with the MAC address of the sender and the receiver. I forget which is first. And then right after that, there's a flag for what kind of data is in this Ethernet frame. There's a flag for IPv4, a flag for IPv6, there's a flag for ARP, a flag for Wake on LAN. And what did they do? They invented a new flag. They invented a new type of Ethernet frame. I think the flag was 0888. And that meant if a router got that, it would reopen port 32764. Now, of course, Ethernet's not routable. So no one in Russia is going to be sending this command to routers in the United States. But if you're on the LAN, you can send that magic packet, so to speak, and reopen the port. And remember, Google knows every Wi-Fi password in the world, and chances are Apple knows them too. If you trust Apple, I'll sell you a bridge. And of course, your ISP. Your ISP, if you know Ethernet, your ISP is basically on the same LAN segment as you are. So whoever really wanted to keep that backdoor in the router, they did a great job, and I'm amazed that we hacked and found it. And if you're in ISP, there's another command you can send to all your customers, and all the routers that are vulnerable to this will respond and say, hey, yeah, you can hack me. It's amazing. So from the LAN side, you can test for whether that port is open or not. Here's my test your router page. There's all sorts of tests. Wow, time flies. This is one of the tests of your DNS servers. Really can't stress enough to be in the habit of testing what DNS servers you're talking to. Consumer router is bad. Okay, I have nothing against Best Buy. They're a fine store. I shop there. But basically, if they're selling a router, you don't want to buy it. Routers are buggy. Of course, we've seen some of the bugs. Huge list. If you look at this page goes on and on and on and on. The list of bugs is just phenomenal. And these aren't obscure bugs that only happen on a Tuesday when the moon is shining at a certain degree. These are like brutally obvious bugs. These are shameful bugs. This was some ASUS router that I'd given to a client of mine. I logged on remotely to it one day. I got this. What does this mean? This doesn't mean anything. I said, oh my God, this router is making me look bad. I can't live with this. This was one of my favorite stories. The topic of this article, I could care less about, dull and boring. But embedded in this, like the 18th paragraph, he tells a story. He was helping a friend set up a new ASUS router. He set a nice long password, reboots the router, gives the password, he can't get in. Anyone care to guess what's going on? Come on, not even a guess? Bingo, it's too long, absolutely. All right, he knows all about security. He picked like a 30-character password. The ASUS router only took the first 16, and that was it. You know, it doesn't tell you it only takes 16 characters. It just truncates them with no error message. And, you know, eventually he figured it out, what was going on. But, I mean, how many mistakes do you make to the point where you truncate a 20-character password down to 16 and don't tell anyone about it? And the fact that you limit passwords to 16 tells me you're probably not hashing it when you saved it. This was not important. This is also just about the whole router industry, the consumer router industry. I don't need to read this. Time is short. Suffice it to say, it kind of explains why router software is very often buggy. Oh, and this is by Tim Higgins. He is the guy behind SmallNet Builder, which is reviews routers and NAS boxes for a living. Another reason routers are bad is they don't update software. This was from January 2016, the Wall Street Journal. Big scandal, routers shipped with old software. Not news to those of us who follow it. Here's some of the details of just how old the software is. Wow, I'm 10 minutes away. Wow, okay, we'll skip the details. Suffice it to say, all these routers are using software that's 7, 8, 9, and 10 years old. All of them. These guys too. They did it. They looked at 37 different routers, examined the firmware. Every single one had software 7, 8, 9 years old with no bugs in it. When was this? This was from, I forget, a couple of years ago. Anyone hear about the misfortune cookie? Oh, it's such a great story, but I'm short on time. All you had to do was send this is web server software, had a bug in 2002. The company, AllegroSoft, fixed the bug in 2005. 2014, they're getting bug reports. They say, wait a minute, this is the bug we fixed 9 years ago. This is from Checkpoint Software. They found 9 years after they'd fixed the bug, Checkpoint found 200 different router models still vulnerable to that bug. They found, I think it was 15 million live routers on the internet vulnerable to this bug in the web server software from AllegroSoft. You can't make this stuff up. They fixed it 9 years ago. Oh, and ASUS. ASUS has miserable security. The FTC got after them. ASUS agreed to be monitored for 20 years. I won't go into the details. Suffice it to say, if your security is so bad the FTC notices, it's pretty bad. Internet service providers, yeah, they have a Sharknado. Anyone heard of Sharknado? I don't know if that broke out of the nerd news into the mainstream. By the way, this is the best blog title of the year, guaranteed. This was AT&T boxes. Yeah, I don't have a picture of them. But these were AT&T boxes with all sorts. They had 2 open ports, 1 open port on the WAN side. 1 open port did SSH, hard-coded user ID and password. Open ports on the LAN side, hard-coded user ID and passwords. I mean, it's as big a disgrace as it could possibly be, and no one here really even knows about it. AT&T said nothing. AT&T copied Apple. They said absolutely nothing. If you're an AT&T Uverse customer, you absolutely want to use your own stuff. I wish I could go into the details. This, by the way, was to save money. Saving money is not the priority here for using your own box. Yeah?
The problem with the Sharknado thing was they were all ADSL routers. You pretty much got to use them and subscribe to Verizon's Fios service. What they do is you take fiber to a certain access point, but then it's copper wire to your house, and you need a specific DSL router to use it. So you can't swap out. You can't swap in your own stuff.
Oh, really?
Well, you could swap in. You could swap in a modem.
All right.
Your own router, but it's still going to be susceptible.
All right, this is such a great story, but time doesn't allow. This is from Esset, We Live Security, Esset, the antivirus company. They found FinFisher, which is spyware, official spyware being installed. They found that 2 separate ISPs in 2 separate countries assisted in installing this FinFisher. They did not name which country it was. And of course, everyone heard about, was it back in March, that ISPs got the US government to let them sell your browsing history. You know, that didn't happen by accident. They lobbied for that. So yeah, I would not use any hardware from my internet service provider. And oh, I wish I could tell you this story, maybe afterwards if you want to hear. Oh. Mostly trusted routers. PepWave serves Soho, sells for $200. It is, all right, I have a topic I absolutely have to do in the next 6 minutes. Let me get ahead. By the way, anyone see this picture before? Yeah, it's really famous. The NSA hacking Cisco. So you say, oh, you know, avoid all the consumer routers. Yeah, sure, but, you know, Cisco. The problem with finding a secure router is if you go too high-end, like Cisco and Juniper, the NSA also is, you know, they have their sights set on Cisco and Juniper. So needless to say, they probably do a good job, and not just our spies everywhere. So PepLink is a nice thing about it. Oh yeah, here's Juniper. Nice thing about PepLink, they're a middle-class company. They're not big enough to get attention from the official spy agencies, but yet they're a big step up from the consumer routers. See, they're not even on this list. That's fine by me. I prefer to be a lower target. Synology is very good at installing bug fixes. So I will skip this. This is amazing. Yeah, I mean, they beat Peplink here too. You can install bug fixes like just for version 5 and not version 6 until you feel comfortable with version 6. You can have it install bug fixes automatically. You can have it install them manually. You can schedule it. They're really great about it. And the last month, we had DNS mask and crack. Synology was right on the ball. I mean, they released patches very, very quickly. However, the Synology router is a consumer router. It is top tier. It is the king of the hill consumer. It has every bell and whistle you could possibly ask for. It supports 20 kinds of VPN servers, 18 VPN clients. It's a NAS box, of course. It does VLANs. It does all sorts of stuff. Another possible, for people who are big on open source, this is a router, $40 to begin with. It's actually a VPN router, completely open source, no proprietary bits. Oh, this is not available in the United States. Here are some others. I'm sure other people can come up with others. Oh, UPnP. Wow, 4 minutes. I'm going to skip UPnP. UPnP, by the way, may break down the internet. How many people here are familiar with UPnP? Oh, great. OK, I don't feel so bad skipping it. Network isolation. VLANs and guest networks. Large companies, of course, Sony. No network isolation. When Sony got hacked, the whole company went down. For consumers, guest Wi-Fi network is where you're going to see network isolation. The more isolation, the better. Of course, if you get hacked with ransomware, it limits what the ransomware can see. What should guest Wi-Fi do? In the best case, if you have a guest Wi-Fi network, as isolated as can possibly be, guest users can't see other guest users, can't see anyone else on the router, can't see anything that's Ethernet connected, can't even get to the router at all. I mean, you have to go through it, but if the router has a web interface, you can't even reach it. And of course, the guest Wi-Fi run. This is like the best case scenario. Consumer routers, of course, are going to have options about this because it's a little difficult. What about here? What about here? What about O'Reilly 17? How do you think it does against this in terms of isolating you? Those of you who are online right now. Well, terrible. No need to guess. There's the router. They do block HTTP and HTTPS. Even if you knew the password, you couldn't log in. But you're not isolated. Here you are, at least as of yesterday, O'Reilly 17, no network isolation. Everyone here who's on the O'Reilly network can see everyone else who's on the other O'Reilly network. This is bad. This is inexcusable, by the way. I noticed this last year. I went to Lincoln Center, and I did the same sort of thing. Lincoln Center, I think they use Aruba. I contacted Aruba. I said, do you have an option for this? And Aruba said, yeah, sure. It's called XYZ. There's nothing to it. But the nerds at Lincoln Center, they don't do it. Nobody does this. Nobody actually really isolates you. And what's so bad about this? There are lots of attacks that can happen within the network. You go to Starbucks. You think you're protected. You use a VPN. Oh boy, I got a VPN, I'm safe. Guess what the VPN does? It protects your internet connection. Guess what the VPN does for protecting you from the guy sitting next to you in the Starbucks network? It doesn't do anything. It doesn't protect your LAN side at all. It only protects your WAN side. So all sorts of things I can see about people here on this network as of yesterday. Someone's running TeamViewer. My God. Here, somebody's running VNC. Somebody has an iPhone 8 and they're syncing. I should not be able to see this. I am not a hacker. This is just Fing. This is a standard, ordinary, dull and boring LAN scanner. You should not be visible to me. So whoever set up this network, this is my network at home, and I am a step up. You see here, I did the same thing. You see two devices. You see the router and my Asus Zenfone that I ran Fing from. That's all you see. That's all Fing sees. But you see there on the left, I have an internet router, internet radio. That's on the same network. There's other devices on the same network, but my network is isolated. When I run Fing, it doesn't see the other things on the network. This is on Peplink, how you configure it. You notice here you can also, each LAN port can be assigned to its own VLAN. A VLAN, time is running out. A VLAN is just a small section of a network that can be completely isolated unto itself. In this case, I have a Vonage telephone adapter. It's plugged into one port on my router. And nothing else in my house can see that Vonage telephone adapter. All right, that was reminding me we're done. And also that Vonage telephone adapter, if it was hacked, it can't see anything else in my house, nothing. It's completely isolated in its own VLAN. Here's an SSID assigned to a VLAN. You see the layer 2 isolation, one checkbox. That's all it takes to completely isolate you from your fellow students here in this room. One lousy checkbox. You simply assign an SSID to a VLAN, and that's all there is to it. Firewall rules, all right, we're out of time. Modems are computer tubes. Did anybody get access to those modems? All right, we have to end, I'm sorry. Too much stuff. 4:30, we're done. I will be here if anyone wants to talk about anything. Thank you very much.